The One Big Beautiful Bill marches on. We take a look at what's happening in the House of Representatives right now. An attempted shakedown of Target, and Chuck Schumer accidentally previews ending the IRS. All of that and so much more today on 10-Minute Drill.
Everybody get up, get up.
The story of America is the story of an adventure.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
We are a nation under God, and I believe God intended for us to be free.
On Tuesday, the United States Senate advanced President Trump's big beautiful bill by a vote of 51-50, with Vice President J.D. Vance breaking the tie. Democrats reacted with a mixture of emotions and observations.
That's the sun rising behind me.
I am shaking with fury over what just happened.
Finally got out of the Capitol, and this is pretty exhausted.
7 a.m. update. Egg McMuffin, hash browns.
I'm just off the floor for the longest vote-a-rama in Senate history.
Leaving the Senate now. At the end of the vote, when the Republicans won, they cheered. They cheered.
Just leaving the Senate now. Sadly, the big, ugly, awful bill just passed.
A third of all children in the U.S. are on Medicaid.
Watching this, it appears that Democrats got some kind of millennial or Gen Z staffer-led training on video content and the idea of direct-to-camera selfie videos, which are a great idea, but a lot of those look a little bit like when you're FaceTiming with your grandparents and the camera's up here and you're seeing their forehead and things trail off, and next thing you know, the phone's on the ground and you know, they forget they're talking to you. The other thing that Democrats have been doing is bringing in patients to try and talk about the Medicaid part of this. Here's a patient brought in by Amy Klobuchar.
You know, my name is Dan Smith, but more importantly, this is my daughter, Claire Smith.
So Dan, the father, is talking about his daughter, Claire, who has a disability. But what Amy Klobuchar is not talking about here is why she thinks Claire should have to compete for care through Medicaid against able-bodied couch potatoes and illegal immigrants. That's what this really comes down to. Claire is not at risk of losing access to Medicaid through this bill at all. In fact, this bill will make access easier for people like Claire to get it because it will take off millions of people who are increasing wait times, who are able-bodied couch potatoes who are choosing not to work, or again, illegal immigrants. CBO has found millions of people fit that categorization. And we know from polling that the American people overwhelmingly support taking them off that program. Here's a new poll from One Nation. 72% agree that able-bodied adults should have to show they're either looking for a job or are employed to receive Medicaid benefits. 66% agree we should cut Medicaid benefits from people who are in this country illegally, and 66% agree that there is waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicaid that must be addressed. So again, as you hear these Democrats talk about this, you need to remember, one, who is actually going to lose Medicaid? Illegal immigrants and people that should not be on the program because they are able-bodied, able to work, and should be out looking for a job but are choosing not to. These eligibility requirements are incredibly popular and will make the program work better. Now, the bill moves over to the House side. Let's take a look over there.
We are the Doctors Caucus, Democratic Doctors Caucus. We have cared for the sickest patients in our communities.
House of Representatives is best known for being a summer camp for theater kids. And this is a group of members of Congress who are also doctors who are standing in the hallway shouting about how Medicaid and the Republican bill will hurt Medicaid access. You can see no one's really listening to them. And often the Democrat stunts look like when you see kind of a crazy person on the street shouting into the void and everybody just kind of pretending they're not there. Also in the House, Jamie Raskin.
No taxes on tips, which is part of this bill for working people who work on a tipped wage. Do you support that?
You know, I haven't looked seriously at it.
So the House is debating the bill now, trying to move to it before the 4th of July deadline on Friday. Republicans believe they are close to getting all of those votes. The debate will be very theatrical from the Democrat side, somewhat theatrical from the Republican side, but the hope is to have this done sometime on Thursday or on Friday, but there is a chance this could lead into next week if they continue to work on getting a deal done between members. That won't be a problem. President Trump has suggested that he's perfectly okay if this needs to move to next week to get it done right. However, he has cleared his schedule today and is working the phones hard to try and get every Republican vote. A new poll released by the New York Times shows that the American people overwhelmingly agree with a number of key Supreme Court decisions. 77% feel schools should permit religious opt-outs for instructions on gender and sexuality. 64% say states should be able to ban trans procedures and treatments for minors. Part of the reason this is notable is over the last several years, Democrats have spent tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars attacking the Supreme Court, attempting to destroy their credibility in an effort to make it seem weaker as they attempted to take it down because they disapproved of the conservative majority that President Trump was able to nominate and have confirmed in his first term. That clearly is not working here, but it also is a reminder that the American people overwhelmingly are a lot more common sense than sometimes the activist portion of the left believes. Is a congressional caucus attempting to shake down Target? Washington Free Beacon has a story about the Congressional Black Caucus threatening to boycott Target and lead national boycotts after Target announced they were no longer funding the Congressional Black Caucus's nonprofit arm. Also, after Target in January announced they were ending their DEI and racial quota programs throughout the entire corporation. Some of the demands from the Congressional Black Caucus were quite alarming. Reinstate Target's diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that were eliminated or rolled back. Update the CBC on the status of the financial investments and other policies that were pledged publicly. That is directly referring to the sponsorship of the Congressional Black Caucus's nonprofit foundation, hence the Shakedown. And then lastly, disclose the makeup of Target's workforce diversity, business, supplier diversity, and community investment. The Congressional Black Caucus is demanding that Target reinstate quotas, both for their own employment, but for their suppliers as well. Those racial quotas are incredibly unpopular. One thing we've talked about extensively here, the concept of diversity is popular to the American people, but it is not popular when it's forced through racial preferences and quotas, which are incredibly unpopular. Spain has announced a plan to ban all advertising on fossil fuels and gas-powered cars, but also certain plane flights that use too much fuel. You'll remember a part of the Green New Deal proposal that Democrats launched several years ago included banning air travel, among other things. Spain appears to be carrying that banner a little bit further by trying to narrow down certain legs of flights that can be advertised based on length because of how it impacts the climate. This is a massive warning for the United States. Former Trump official Steve Malloy wrote in the Daily Caller just last week that proposals coming from certain parts of the Trump administration to potentially ban pharmaceutical ads might sound really good to a lot of people for a number of reasons. However, they also risk opening that door potentially to banning advertising on everything from gas-powered cars, which is what Spain is attempting to do right now, but also things like home appliances you like or anything else the left and climate activists in America might deem to be a danger to the climate. And so as we talk about advertising and things like that, it's interesting to look to Europe for those warning signs of what could come here from the left of the United States. We do love comments. So for today's fan mail, we've got a few comments from YouTube we're going to look at. From Torny Henschel, grateful for the format. Quick rundown clarification, I can get on with my day. Thank you. Thanks, Torny. From Minerva Crespo 5178, amazing video. I can't thank you enough. Well, thank you, Minerva. Here's one comment on our discussion about the Supreme Court decision on Mahmoud v. Taylor, the parental rights case. From Alejandro Duarte 990, I disagree. I feel like if something as basic and universal as human anatomy and sexuality, especially because of religious reasoning, then it's a gateway to then targeting other core lessons like science, math, medicine, social studies. The point of public schools is to give the public a general education about the world around them. If parents can't handle kids learning and asking questions, maybe they too should seek some education too. Wouldn't it be amazing if we had a public schools that taught everything it could with the ability to show kids both theological and secular understanding? Alejandro, I see what you're getting at. However, if you listen to the oral arguments here, we're talking about children as young as 3 years old. And the components in that education being things like bondage and people in leather at pride parades and what that means about freedom and liberation. Again, I don't think 3-year-olds need an education on that. And I actually think most people would agree with me on that point. So again, as you're talking about public schools, you know, this might open the door to less conversation about math, science, biology. I think this narrows back to what schools should actually be focusing on instead of trying to teach 3-year-olds about bondage and pride celebrations. Lastly, from Bing Bing T5Q, Great job. Clear a lot of confusion. All Americans should and must see this podcast. So many people with their own personal selfishness is crashing this great, big, beautiful bill that will prevent the highest tax cut, removing fraud in Medicaid, help many businesses, especially the small businesses, help blue-collar and hardworking Americans keep more money in their pockets, and help our seniors. Bing, bing, I agree. And we do often read negative comments too, but thank you guys for comments of all shapes and sizes. Please keep them coming. Questions, feedback, whatever. When we can get to them, we will. For today's You Can't Make It Up segment, we have talked extensively about Doge and USAID. USAID was doing some good things, but they were also doing a lot of crazy things. And so what Doge and the State Department have done is fold up the good parts of USAID and move them to the State Department. Democrats have not taken kindly to this. And with the announcement of USAID's headquarters in D.C. closing, here's what Chuck Schumer said.
If Doge attacks USAID today, then you can be sure they'll move on to another target tomorrow. Who knows? Maybe it'll be the Postal Service or the IRS.
Did Chuck Schumer accidentally just float closing the IRS? Don't threaten us with a good time. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us on 10 Minute Drill. Please leave a comment, like, subscribe, tell your friends. Thanks again.